Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Chen Ming looked at the calculated result and hesitated. This coordinate is not too far from where he is now, and the spacecraft will arrive in a short time. But the group of people who stayed here before may have gone there. They should be investigators or researchers. Since the mind pulse is still going on, it means that they may have died there. Although it is also possible that they successfully found the mind pulse generator, took it away or destroyed it, but a new one appeared again later. But in any case, this coordinate point and its vicinity are quite dangerous. Chen Ming does not want to contact the mechanical race that can delay the expansion of the human empire. Even if the mechanical race on the planet may be just a few scattered points, Chen Ming also has no military spacecraft and military weapons specially used for combat. It is not certain who has the higher actual combat power. Therefore, after considering for a long time, Chen Ming decided to go and see. Even though he knew the danger and the difficulty of handling the mind pulse transmitter, he still had to touch this bad luck. Because Chen Ming did not know when the mind pulse would fall on his head. Although the group of people who had lived here for 3 months did not seem to be affected by the mind pulse, Chen Ming was not sure whether they had special protective equipment. In addition, he was only a little away from leaving the planet. If something went wrong at the last moment, the consequences would be unimaginable. But Chen Ming was also a little worried. If the target of the mind pulse could be chosen. If he went there, would the mind pulse device turn the gun around and give him a hard time? Chen Ming was not sure, but even if it was really as he guessed, Chen Ming would rather choose to hold the initiative in his own hands instead of praying that he would not suffer. But Chen Ming actually thought of another way. That is to leave here and hunt farther away from the mind pulse generator. Before, Chen Ming thought that the source of animal madness was the virus, so he preconceived that animals anywhere could be infected by the virus. But now, since it has been determined that the source of animal madness is the mind pulse generator, that means that as long as he is far enough away from the generator, even if it cannot be guaranteed to be 100%, there is a great possibility that he will not encounter the mind pulse again. However, once other places are also affected by the mind pulse, or even more seriously, then Chen Ming may waste more time here. Just when Chen Ming was struggling. Squeak! Xiaoshi suddenly called out, just like the mind pulse swept across the nearby animals before. But this time, Chen Ming did not need Xiaoshi to remind him. Because at this moment, Chen Ming's mind was occupied by a sudden feeling of anxiety. The mind pulse has indeed affected Chen Ming. But the effect of this influence seems a little bit bad. Chen Ming reached out to touch his head, but only touched his helmet. Except for the discomfort of having a lot of messy things stuffed into his mind at the beginning, but he quickly adapted to this feeling after a few seconds. This sudden anxiety is not even as good as the fatigue that suddenly appeared when he was carrying out large-scale transformation and repair of the spacecraft before. Chen Ming recalled the panel of the protective suit he saw last time with some confusion. Although the panel showed that the protective suit had undergone several modifications, no matter how you looked at it, the protective suit should not have undergone any modifications in terms of mental pulse protection. Moreover, Chen Ming turned his head to look at Xiaoshi, who was shivering on his shoulder, and his performance was exactly the same as last time. This mental pulse seemed to be no different from the last time. Although he was affected by the mental pulse, there was also good news for Chen Ming, that is, he did not have to consider whether the mental pulse would affect him. In this way, Chen Ming did not have to worry about whether he should leave this area. Anyway, he would go to the coordinates to take a look first. Chen Ming made up his mind and quickly took Xiaoshi back to the spaceship. Although he was not affected obviously, Xiaoshi's performance still made Chen Ming more worried about its condition. After all, compared with the location of the camp, the distance between here and the mental pulse transmitter is obviously closer now. Another point is that since Xiaoshi and himself were affected, would there be a few animals around who were affected? Chen Ming acted quickly, and the spacecraft was launched again in less than half a minute. But it was just like the worst-case scenario that Chen Ming had imagined. Chen Ming soon discovered a group of crazy animals gathering in the direction of the spacecraft. And these animals were the air jellyfish that Chen Ming encountered on the first day of landing on Ramu. Speak of the devil. So you can't see many of them normally, but now you can gather such a large group. How did you do it? Chen Ming's words unconsciously became more and more. Although the empty jellyfish in front of him might not be the same batch he encountered at the beginning, although he could directly take off vertically and get rid of them. But Chen Ming didn't want to do that now. Not to mention that he had previously made a series of modifications to the machine gun specifically to deal with them. That is to say, even if the machine gun was not modified, Chen Ming's inexplicable anger at this time made him not want to let go of these empty jellyfish. Moreover, Chen Ming could also take this opportunity to test whether his modified machine gun could cause enough damage to these astonishing numbers of empty jellyfish. His emotions were a little difficult to control, but at least Chen Ming's brain was not broken. The weapon experiment was quite suitable for the moment. If it succeeded, it would be the best, which meant that Chen Ming's modifications were correct. If it failed, Chen Ming could still analyze the problem of his weapon modification based on today's situation. Then Chen Ming's next modification of the weapon can correct these problems. Moreover, Chen Ming is facing the empty jellyfish, which means that Chen Ming has a way to escape at any time. Just fly straight into the sky. With so many reasons in front of Chen Ming to attack this group of empty jellyfish, Chen Ming will naturally not miss this opportunity. The spaceship quickly drew several arcs in the air and gradually guided the crazy empty jellyfish into a big ball as before. Chen Ming pulled the trigger with a sense of venting his anxious emotions. The ultra-high firing rate brought by the two double-barreled machine guns and the extremely fast feeding provided by the chain feeding instantly cleared a large area of empty jellyfish on the shooting trajectory of the spaceship. This scene made Chen Ming's mouth corners unconsciously rise slightly. Continue to spray bullets at other empty jellyfish. The speed of clearing the empty jellyfish has increased, so the possibility of the empty jellyfish besieging Chen Ming's spaceship again has been reduced to 0. Chen Ming didn't even need to turn on the overload power grid to overload the engine to avoid it. Relying only on 2 modified machine guns, in just over 10 minutes, he cleared out a group of empty jellyfish that was almost more in number than last time. As the anxiety in Chen Ming's head dissipated, the figures of the empty jellyfish that came out of nowhere gradually disappeared. The mind pulse passed just like that. Chen Ming ignored the blue gel-like objects that almost covered the ground below the spacecraft, including several stone buildings. He didn't want to be bombed again. He directly turned the spacecraft west and left. Before going to the location of the mind pulse generator, Chen Ming planned to go back to the temporary camp first. He was too hasty to leave in the morning and forgot that today was the day to harvest the first batch of orange fruits planted outside the spacecraft. Go back and harvest the land first. Food and a stable source of food are what he needs most now, and everything else can be put off for a while. The spaceship flew back to the sky above the temporary camp. As soon as the spaceship approached the camp, Chen Ming saw the bull beast that was tied up by chains, but still struggling. In fact, after learning the truth about the animal's madness and experiencing it personally, this bull beast whose brain was damaged by the mental pulse was useless to Chen Ming. However, Chen Ming was not in a hurry to kill it and planned to see what its final outcome would be. But when Chen Ming saw it, a question suddenly popped up in his mind. How did these crazy animals find him accurately? Before, the bull beast found him hiding in the bushes on the other side of the river without any signs, and the purple-tailed deer that suddenly appeared next to the camp earlier. Chen Ming didn't say anything about the empty jellyfish. After all, the spaceship was so noisy, but the bull beast and the purple-tailed deer gave Chen Ming the feeling that they only had eyes for him. Is there something special about him as a human being? Chen Ming didn't know how to explain this situation. But Chen Ming thought about it, since the mechanical race had an inexplicable hatred for humans. Then it seems reasonable that animals that have become crazy due to the influence of the mechanical race's mental pulse can directly find the existence of humans. Chen Ming didn't think much about it. After the spaceship stopped, he took the planting tools. He still had things to do next. Time passed quickly. The night of the 15th day since Chen Ming came to this planet came. Chen Ming spent part of his daytime on investigating the 3 buildings. The rest of the time was basically spent on farming. The first batch of orange fruits he planted had been harvested, and the second batch of orange fruits, although Chen Ming felt that the probability of staying on the planet until the next harvest was not high. But since there were extra seeds, Chen Ming still planted them as usual. He repaired his weapons during the day and was affected by the mental pulse, so his mental state was not very good. So even if he wanted to go to the location where the suspected mental pulse device was located, he had to wait until tomorrow when Chen Ming recovered. The night was getting darker. Chen Ming lay on the bed in the living cabin, and it was a bit difficult to fall asleep as yesterday. Because there might be a fight where I'm going tomorrow. It's not a fight where the spacecraft uses the advantages of technology and the times to fight animals, which is completely different from the previous one. It's a fight where the difference in strength between the 2 sides cannot be confirmed. Chen Ming is not optimistic about the firepower of the spacecraft, but the limitation of the materials in the spacecraft's storage cabin makes it impossible for Chen Ming to make some preparations at the last minute. Looking at the modification options on the machine gun panel that appear in front of him, which are completely insufficient in materials, Chen Ming can only sigh and force himself to sleep. Mechanical tribe. The next day, Chen Ming woke up early again. This time, Chen Ming did not complete his daily work, but started the spacecraft as soon as he was completely awake. Flying in the direction of the coordinates determined yesterday, Xiaoshi seemed to have noticed that Chen Ming's state was different from usual today, and he took the initiative to climb onto Chen Ming's shoulder and rub Chen Ming's face. But Chen Ming didn't have any extra time to play with Xiaoshi today, so he could only touch its head to stop it from running around. Chen Ming wanted to use all his energy on what might happen next. As the spacecraft gradually approached the target location, Chen Ming took the initiative to close the porthole protection layer that would only be closed when the spacecraft entered the atmosphere, and only relied on the camera outside the spacecraft to observe the situation outside. Not long after, the image of the target location appeared in front of Chen Ming. It was not a mechanical building filled with various advanced equipment as Chen Ming had expected. There was only an open space here, and a square mechanical device about 2 meters high was placed on the open space, which looked very simple. Next to the equipment, there were a total of 3 mechanical bodies with obvious differences in appearance. That was the mechanical family. The mechanical body closest to the equipment was about 1.5 meters high, with 4 mechanical arms, each with different professional equipment. It looked like a mechanical family dedicated to maintaining equipment. The appearance of the other 2 mechanical bodies was completely different from this logistics mechanical family. 2 meters in height, the overall appearance is somewhat similar to that of a mantis, with a slender body and covered with gray-green external armor with various traces of weathering. Their left arms are mechanical arms that imitate the structure of human arms, and their right arms are replaced by a special large weapon. The appearance of this weapon is similar to that of a gun. From a distance, a large number of coils can be seen exposed, which seems to be some kind of electromagnetic weapon. Although this electromagnetic weapon is almost half the length of the mechanical body itself, Chen Ming did not feel any sense of disharmony when he looked at it. Instead, it made the 2 mechanical bodies look more threatening. At the same time when Chen Ming saw the mechanical race through the camera, the mechanical race also saw Chen Ming's spaceship. 2 combat mechanical bodies similar to the shape of mantis raised the large electromagnetic weapons on their right arms at the same time and aimed at the spaceship in the air. Chen Ming immediately let the 2 machine guns shoot in the direction of the mechanical race, and at the same time he was also controlling the spaceship to fly quickly. But as Chen Ming's ears rang with 2 almost continuous dull hammering sounds, Chen Ming suddenly found that the durability of the bottom armor on the panel of the spaceship was reduced from 100% to 99%. If it was just this, it would not be a big deal, but then, a few words appeared behind the armor durability value. The armor has been penetrated. In an instant, Cold sweat broke out on Chen Ming's head, and he immediately gave up the plan to counterattack. When the two mechanical bodies below were still preparing for the second shot, he immediately started the overload power grid. The engine was overclocked, and the speed that burst out instantly made the spaceship rise immediately and disappear outside the shooting range of the mechanical body. Chen Ming looked at the picture taken by the camera below the spacecraft with some shock, and turned on the 3D imaging of the spacecraft as a whole. The picture on the camera showed that there were 2 more holes in the armor at the bottom of the spacecraft. And in the 3D imaging, it can be clearly seen that the bullets of the 2 mechanical tribes have penetrated the armor and just got stuck between the armor and structure of the spacecraft. The bullets were just a little short of penetrating the hull structure and causing damage to the function of the spacecraft components. The armor of the civilian spacecraft is too weak. Fortunately, I didn't let the spacecraft face downwards just now. Otherwise, if the 2 shots hit the porthole directly, the heat-insulating armor outside the porthole would definitely be penetrated instantly, and the porthole would have the same fate. Even Chen Ming himself might have died here. Fortunately, Chen Ming didn't let this happen. And Chen Ming is now clear. If I want to have some ideas about the mechanical tribe and the mind pulse generator under their protection, then the current iron ore is far from enough. However, the test just now was not without good news for Chen Ming. First of all, Chen Ming could be sure that the mental pulses produced by the mental pulse generator were not directional, otherwise he should have felt the influence of the mental pulses throughout the whole process. Secondly, Chen Ming could see through the video recording of the spacecraft camera. When he found that the mechanical race had hostile behavior, he chose to fire back immediately, and nearly half of the bullets fired by the machine gun hit the target. Although the bullets that hit the 2 combat mechanical races were almost all bounced off by the seemingly worn-out armor and had no effect. But the bullets that hit the mental pulse device at the back did damage part of its shell. Even if that little damage seemed to be repaired by the 4-handed repair mechanical race immediately. But as long as it can cause damage, it means that Chen Ming does not have to kill the mechanical race first before disposing of the mental pulse device. And Chen Ming's goal was not to kill the mechanical race from the beginning, but to destroy the mental pulse device so that his hunting could continue. But even if Chen Ming's target is not the mechanical race, the difficulty is reduced. Chen Ming also at least thickened the armor of the spacecraft to the extent that the large electromagnetic weapon could not penetrate it with one shot, so that the spacecraft could hold out in the hands of the 2 mechanical clans until the equipment was destroyed. Chen Ming opened the panel of the spacecraft armor. The modification interface was opened. There were 4 modification options displayed above: heavy armor, explosive reactive armor, multilayer buffer armor, and armor material replacement. If you want to deal with the mechanical clan's weapons with exaggerated penetration ability, heavy armor or armor material replacement is obviously very suitable. However, Chen Ming can't get materials with higher strength than aluminum steel composite materials now. So he can only choose heavy armor from these 2 options. This is the simplest and crudest thickening and weighting of the spacecraft armor, at the cost of losing a certain degree of maneuverability of the spacecraft in exchange for stronger defensive performance. But after selecting the modification option, another problem appeared in front of Chen Ming. The number of materials required for the modification of the spacecraft armor is very large, which is completely not on the same order of magnitude as the materials required for the previous modification of the pistol. But half a month has passed since Chen Ming landed on the planet from space, and most of the metal resources collected at the time have been consumed in transformation and maintenance. There is not enough material in the storage cabin, and it will take some time even if he takes off again to the asteroid belt to collect. However, Chen Ming immediately thought of a compromise. That is to use the advantages of the spacecraft on hand. Chen Ming saw the 3 mechanical families clearly before. They did not have components such as wings or jetpacks, which means that they were restricted to the ground. And the spacecraft can fly, as long as the attitude of the spacecraft is adjusted so that only the bottom of the spacecraft is facing the mechanical families. Then Chen Ming only needs to strengthen one side of the bottom armor. It can save a lot of time to obtain materials for transformation. In this way, the time cost spent on mining is acceptable to Chen Ming. But there is another problem in front of Chen Ming. Should he go to space to obtain enough materials for transformation at one time and then land? Or should he choose to take time to go to the sky and collect minerals in the asteroid ring during the usual work, such as at night? Chen Ming is thinking, what I have to do is definitely to complete my goal as the first priority. And my highest priority goal has always been to get enough food. Going to space to collect ore at one time is indeed faster than solving the two problems of spacecraft armor modification and destroying the mind pulse equipment. But this also means that Chen Ming will be completely unable to hunt in the next few days, and the second batch of crops he just planted will be abandoned because of lack of care. The guaranteed food will not be eaten. So after careful consideration, Chen Ming still thinks it is best to continue hunting during the day. Even if the existence of mind pulse makes hunting very difficult, difficulty does not mean that it is completely impossible to do it. To be honest, as long as the next hunting can be successful 1 or 2 times, Chen Ming can completely ignore the farmland, the camp, the mechanical race, and their mind pulse equipment and run away directly. Therefore, continuing to hunt during the day and waiting until night to go to space to collect minerals relying on the spacecraft's own automatic mining function is the most suitable mining method for Chen Ming. And before, the spacecraft stayed on the ground at night mainly to rely on the spacecraft's camera to protect the farmland at night. Now half a month has passed, Chen Ming has already completely reinforced the fence and set up a large number of traps outside the fence. It is basically unlikely that farmland will be destroyed by animals in the middle of the night. So launching the spacecraft at night is also a choice to fully play the role of the spacecraft. The only drawback of this approach is that the spacecraft repeatedly enters and exits the atmosphere, which greatly increases the demand for fuel. Chen Ming didn't want to worry about the fuel problem at this time. Anyway, if there is no fuel, he can go to the space station to get it. The space station has plenty of fuel. After considering almost all the issues that need to be considered, Chen Ming put his attention back to the present. In fact, his first attempt just now should be considered successful. Knowing the situation of the mechanical race and their equipment, and knowing that the armor of the spacecraft can't withstand a shot from the mechanical race's large electromagnetic weapons. If I modify the spacecraft, the next time I come here, I will still be as embarrassed as now. Then Chen Ming will decisively give up the idea of making trouble for the mechanical race at the moment. Choose a safer but slower way to get food and then make plans. The spacecraft returned to the temporary camp soon. After repairing the damage to the spacecraft, Chen Ming continued his daily work, farming and hunting. Anyway, Chen Ming has personally experienced the mind pulse, and he knows very well that the impact of the mind pulse on people is not too exaggerated. The mind pulse generator that cannot be handled for the time being should not have any fatal impact on him, at least in the short term. After experiencing a mental pulse, Xiaoshi seemed to recover from anxiety much faster. As long as he could survive the next few days, he would not have to suffer from mental pulses anymore. The day passed quickly. Before the night came, Chen Ming controlled the spacecraft to return to space again. Near the abandoned mining space station that was still in ruins, the highest priority for mining was set to the most common iron ore. Then Chen Ming activated the spacecraft's automatic collection function. After one night, the smelting furnace in the working cabin of the spacecraft was filled up again as before. After counting the harvest through the panel, Chen Ming found that the harvest tonight probably met 1/5 of the materials needed for the transformation of armor. If he could achieve such efficiency every day, Chen Ming even wanted to change his plan. Go directly to the high-density area and spend a day collecting. However, Chen Ming thought about it carefully and gave up. The main material required for transformation is steel, and it is necessary to collect iron ore, which has the highest content and is the most common in asteroids. Even if you go to the high-density area, the amount obtained each time will not increase, and it may even decrease due to the presence of other minerals. At most, it will save some time for the spacecraft to move, but this time difference is not worth Chen Ming's time to take care of the fields and hunt. Just continue to follow the original plan. When the sky just brightened at the temporary camp, the spacecraft landed in the camp again. The first thing Chen Ming noticed after the spacecraft landed was that the bull beast tied up by himself outside the camp seemed to have died last night. Only one body with extremely serious decay was left there. The cause of death did not seem to be starvation or serious injuries, but rather sudden death caused by high-intensity activities of consciousness and body for several consecutive days. This is the end of most animals that have fallen into madness. The rotten body of the bull beast was of no value to Chen Ming. So before starting work, Chen Ming deliberately cleaned up the plants around the bull beast and burned the body with a fire. Continue to start the repetitive and boring work every day. The 4 days of accumulating materials for modified armor are not long or short. It passed in a blink of an eye. In these days, Chen Ming can clearly perceive many changes around the temporary camp. It seems that his last behavior stimulated the mechanical race. Although the mental pulse did not target him, it appeared more and more frequently. Therefore, the number of animals around is rapidly decreasing, and hunting has become almost impossible. Even if Chen Ming is lucky enough to encounter an animal that has not been affected by the mental pulse, the next moment, the mechanical tribe's mental pulses might affect them, making Chen Ming's long search and several hours of waiting all in vain. Although he was protected by the spacecraft, Chen Ming would basically not be in any danger when encountering crazy animals. But high-frequency mental pulses are actually dangerous in themselves. In recent days, Chen Ming has been affected by the frequent mental pulses and has been feeling uncomfortable. Not to mention Xiao Shi. If Chen Ming hadn't driven the spacecraft into space every night, Xiao Shi and himself could rest peacefully at night. Chen Ming thought Xiao Shi might have gone crazy a long time ago. Fortunately, the spacecraft had collected enough materials around the space station last night. After eagerly completing the modification of the spacecraft armor, Chen Ming couldn't wait any longer. He immediately controlled the spacecraft and flew towards the direction of the mechanical tribe's mental pulse device. The fatigue caused by the large-scale modification of the spacecraft armor was quickly suppressed by Chen Ming's conserving energy in the past few days. And Chen Ming's heartbeat was gradually accelerating as the distance between the spacecraft and Ruemu shortened. Just like when he first came here, fear and excitement of the unknown were mixed together. Before, it was to Ruemu's star, this time, it was to the mechanical race. It will take some time for the spacecraft to reach the target location. When Chen Ming couldn't suppress his emotions, he suddenly remembered that today seemed to be the day for the third batch of orange fruit to be harvested. In order to ease his emotions, Chen Ming got up and went to the planting cabin. The agricultural machinery components have harvested all the fruits, and all the excess vines have been stuffed into the nutrient solution extractor for recycling, and new seeds have been planted. Just like the previous 2 batches of crops, it is enough for Chen Ming to take the fruits to the cold storage room. Chen Ming took several baskets of orange fruits and prepared to leave. But his footsteps suddenly stopped when he stepped out of the door of the planting cabin. Because at this moment, Chen Ming realized something. Because he was worried that there might be a food crisis on the road, he planned to prepare excess food before setting off. But preparing food is actually completely unnecessary on Ruemu's star. He could stay in orbit around the star and plant the highly efficient citrus fruits in the hydroponic chamber. If there is a problem with the cultivation of citrus fruits, such as the degeneration of the varieties, Chen Ming can land on Ramu as soon as possible to find the next batch of replacement crops. The efficiency is a little low, but the safety factor is definitely the highest. In other words, on the first day of Chen Ming's landing, after finding the seeds of citrus fruits. If Chen Ming does not pursue efficiency at all, then waiting for crops to grow in space safely is actually the most stable way. Chen Ming turned his head to look at the hydroponic chamber. When he looked back, Chen Ming's eyes were suddenly attracted by the porthole facing the captain's room at the other end of the corridor. The abandoned mining space station was floating outside. So it seems that this statement cannot be said. Even if the space station is occupied by insects, the fact that no one has paid attention to it for 30 years definitely shows that there are big problems behind the space station and even the entire galaxy. The longer Chen Ming stays near the space station and Raymer, the greater the possibility of accidents in the future. So it is still good to collect the necessary food early and leave early. Moreover, Chen Ming did not only get food on the planet. Xiaoshi, the hamster, is Chen Ming's biggest gain on the planet besides food. Moreover, if Chen Ming can kill those mechanical races later, the mechanical races themselves can also become part of Chen Ming's gains. The large electromagnetic weapons on the right arms of the two mechanical bodies were enough to penetrate the armor of Chen Ming's spaceship with one shot. They can definitely be loaded on the bearing points of the spaceship after simple modification. This is much more powerful than the civilian 22mm caliber machine gun. You should know that Chen Ming encountered countless dangers in the space station and Ramu, two places that can be said to be invisible on the scale of the universe. Chen Ming dared not think about how many troubles he would encounter in the next half-light-year journey. Therefore, for Chen Ming, powerful weapons are the best means to deal with danger. So he would rather take certain risks to find a way to obtain the weapons of the two combat mechanical families. At the cost of facing the known dangers now, in exchange for the means to deal with unknown dangers in the future. Chen Ming is very happy to make such an exchange. The heat-insulating armor outside the porthole of the captain's room gradually opened while Chen Ming was thinking, but was immediately closed by Chen Ming. Because Chen Ming's target location has appeared in his field of vision. As the height of the spaceship gradually dropped to a position where the mechanical race could be seen clearly, Chen Ming's heartbeat gradually stabilized. He took a deep breath and focused all his attention on what he was about to do. Destroy the mind pulse generator. Chen Ming quickly adjusted the attitude of the spaceship so that the bottom armor of the heavy spaceship that he had modified was facing downwards. Whether this thing could be done next depended on the next 10 seconds. The bullets reached the ground faster than the sound of gunfire and the roar of the spaceship engine. The flying dust and violent explosion of sparks immediately made the two combat mechanical races react. Like last time, they raised the large electromagnetic weapons on their right arms and locked the spaceship that passed over their heads. An extremely familiar dull hammering sound rang out. The durability of the spaceship armor panel that Chen Ming had been staring at was instantly reduced by 1%. But this time, the words "armor penetrated" did not appear after the durability value. And in the three-dimensional imaging of the spaceship, Chen Ming could see that the two bullets did not even penetrate half the thickness of the armor. It's over. Chen Ming muttered to himself, stabilizing the attitude of the spacecraft, turning the direction, and hovering over the heads of the mechanical tribe. The two machine guns have each fired nearly 1,000 bullets since they opened fire. Even though the combat mechanical tribe only had some scratches after the baptism of bullets, the mental pulse generator behind them had already been riddled with holes from the appearance. The maintenance mechanical tribe braved the rain of bullets and wanted to take out metal materials from the storage space inside the equipment for repair. But destruction is always easier than repair. Chen Ming filled the machine gun with all the bullets, and another round of 2,000 bullets was fired. Even though Chen Ming controlled the spacecraft within the machine gun's extreme killing range, a large number of bullets failed to hit due to accuracy problems. But in the face of absolute numbers, there is no need to care about accuracy. Under the second round of strafing, the protective layer outside the mental pulse generator was completely destroyed. The internal circuits continued to burst into groups of electric sparks under the baptism of bullets, and Chen Ming even saw open flames burning inside the equipment. There were two more dull hammering sounds. The third and fourth shots of the two combat mechanical families hit the bottom armor of the spacecraft again. This time, the two bullets also failed to penetrate successfully. But Chen Ming's eyes suddenly condensed. Because on the three-dimensional imaging of the spacecraft, the landing points of the two bullets just now were just a little bit away from overlapping with the bullet holes left by the previous round of bullets. Chen Ming immediately chose to repair the armor, and the metal liquid quickly squeezed out the 4 bullets, filling the gaps in the spacecraft armor and restoring the armor to its original state. He had never expected that the accuracy of the mechanical family's shooting would be so exaggerated. If the two mechanical families really had the opportunity to hit the same position with 2 bullets, his thickened armor might really be shot through. At present, this mind pulse device is only 1 breath away from being destroyed. If it turns over in the gutter, it would be a joke. Chen Ming was now extremely glad that he had not let down his guard just now because of the fire in the mind pulse generator, and was still paying attention to the condition of the spacecraft. Otherwise, unexpected situations could hit him head-on at any time. Chen Ming's eyes were withdrawn from the panel. Since he was prepared, he would not give the mechanical race another chance. As long as there was damage on the spacecraft, Chen Ming would immediately repair it. This kind of penetrating damage would not take much mental energy to repair. Finally, under the continuous shooting of 2 machine guns, the fire inside the mind pulse generator was completely uncontrollable and suddenly exploded. The entire generator was torn into pieces and completely destroyed. At this point, Chen Ming's goal had been achieved, and he could just turn around and leave. Without the influence of the mind pulse, hunting would no longer be a difficult task. So Chen Ming immediately changed the flight trajectory of the spacecraft away from the 2 mechanical races that were still aiming at the spacecraft, so as to avoid further attacks. But when the spacecraft completely left their firing range, the spacecraft stopped again. Because Chen Ming didn't plan to leave so easily. The destroyed mind pulse generator and the active mechanical races were attracting Chen Ming to do something. The only problem was that Chen Ming's only attack weapon, the 22mm machine gun, was completely unable to penetrate the armor of the mechanical race and cause enough damage. And the modifications that could be made to the machine guns on the panel did not seem to be able to change the situation. If he wanted to deal with them, it seemed that he could only use an immature method that Chen Ming had thought of before. Chen Ming opened the panel. There was a line like this on the spacecraft type panel. Tonnes, 2,000 tons. This 2,000 tonnage is a value used to roughly distinguish the tonnage of the spacecraft. The iron ore is a frigate, and the frigate can be further divided into different levels such as 500 tons, 1,000 tons, and 2,000 tons. So the specific mass of the iron ore will be slightly different from that displayed on the panel. If the value in the spacecraft manual that Chen Ming had read before is correct, then under the standard Earth weight constant, the weight of the iron ore should be 2,209 tons. There will be some deviations between the weight constants of Ramu and Earth, but not too much. These 2,200 tons are directly pressed down, and Chen Ming does not believe that any existence can withstand it. The spacecraft moved again and returned to the position where the mechanical family was just now. The 3 mechanical families did not choose to track the route that the spacecraft left, but continued to guard the damaged mind pulse generator, as if their mission was like this. Seeing Chen Ming's spacecraft coming back, the 2 combat mechanical families raised the large electromagnetic weapons on their right arms as before, trying to fight back. But the shooting interval of their weapons has become their most fatal problem now, and a bullet cannot penetrate the thickened armor at all. It was difficult for 2 different mechanical families to hit the same position at the same angle at the same time. Failure to hit 2 shots in a row meant that the damage of the previous shot would be repaired immediately by Chen Ming. As long as Chen Ming's spirit could hold up, the mechanical family would never be able to shoot through this heavy armor in this life. At this time, Chen Ming, with a hint of uncontrollable excitement, controlled the spacecraft to accelerate continuously and smashed it from a high altitude to the ground like falling. He did not activate the spacecraft's buffer device until it reached the highest altitude. The spacecraft continued to approach the ground with terrifying gravity acceleration. The mechanical family instantly realized that something was wrong and immediately ran towards the nearest woods that could serve as cover. However, they had just run a few dozen meters when they were completely covered by the shadow of Chen Ming's spacecraft. As the mechanical family struggled in vain to shoot, terrifying pressure was imposed on them. The sound of metal twisting and deforming, which made people cover their ears, came from the bottom of the spacecraft. Immediately afterwards, there was a loud noise when the spacecraft hit the ground. However, Chen Ming was obviously not a fool. If the spacecraft really fell to the ground, he would not be able to get away with it. So before doing this, Chen Ming used the computing power of the spacecraft computer to calculate some data of the spacecraft. With these data, Chen Ming can choose a specific time point to start the buffer device. Before the spacecraft hits the ground, the buffer device just limits the speed of the fall to the impact range that the spacecraft armor can withstand. Therefore, the impact of the spacecraft landing did not cause any damage to the spacecraft itself. Except that there may be some small objects on the spacecraft that will shake and fall to the ground, there will be no major problems. Just thinking about this, Chen Ming saw Xiaoshi running out of the storage compartment at the back and climbing onto his shoulder. Its little paws pressed on its head, and its eyes were full of confusion and puzzlement. Chen Ming reached out and touched its head, comforted it, and continued to do his business. At this time, the three-dimensional image of the spaceship in Chen Ming's eyes showed obvious changes. The bottom armor of the spaceship was dented in 3 pieces, which was obviously caused by the spaceship hitting the mechanical family. It has to be said that the mechanical family is really hard, and the shape of the dented armor is almost the same as that of the mechanical family. However, no matter how hard the mechanical family's armor is, the delicate electronic components inside them can't withstand the impact of thousands of tons of spaceships. Since the spaceship hit the ground just now, the dull hammering sound of the electromagnetic weapons of the mechanical family has completely stopped. Chen Ming didn't hear any abnormal sound from under the spaceship at this time. It should be impossible for the mechanical family to stand up again. Chen Ming controlled the spaceship to take off and repaired the armor of the spaceship at the same time. After a period of gradually accumulated fatigue, the metal liquid flowing out of the storage compartment squeezed out the bodies of the mechanical family stuck at the bottom of the spaceship, and the 3 mechanical bodies fell to the ground like broken dolls. Their appearance looked intact, but Chen Ming couldn't say how broken they were inside. The spaceship landed again on the open space next to it. Chen Ming got off the spaceship and started to clean up the battlefield. He used the carts from the space station to move all the valuable things onto the spaceship after checking their safety. At this time, Chen Ming had to say that the mechanical tribe was quite good. Before his spaceship came down, he took the initiative to distance himself from the wreckage of the Mind Pulse device so that the spaceship would not crush the good things that might still be left in the wreckage. The things left by the mechanical tribe were not many, so Chen Ming quickly packed them up and returned to the spaceship. After checking several times to make sure that nothing was left out, the spaceship took off again and returned to the temporary camp. At this point, Chen Ming really relaxed. The fatigue accumulated from repairing the spaceship many times rushed into his brain. However, Chen Ming still managed to hold on, and even began to count the gains this time with some excitement. It seemed that there was nothing to count about the things he got from the mechanical tribe. There were 3 mechanical bodies in total, 2 combat models, 1 maintenance model, plus the wreckage of the Mind Pulse generator, that's all. But thinking from another perspective, although the quantity of this harvest is not large, the quality is quite high. Especially the 2 combat mechanicals. Chen Ming's eyes kept sweeping over the large electromagnetic weapons on their right arms, and his hands couldn't help but touch the guns, feeling the cold touch. Even though the 2 electromagnetic weapons, which were nearly 1.7 meters long, looked a little old and were slightly bent due to the heavy pressure of the spacecraft, it didn't prevent Chen Ming from appreciating it. After all, this was a weapon that had penetrated the spacecraft armor with 1 shot before. Chen Ming fiddled with the electromagnetic weapons for a long time and suddenly let out a long sigh of satisfaction. After satisfying his own ideas, it was clear what to do next. Chen Ming went to the captain's room and took the repair kit to the storage compartment. The company was quite generous in distributing these repair tools, including cutting tools made of special-grade metal materials. That is, materials that are 1 grade higher than the high-grade metal ores collected by the Type 2 mining laser modified. Chen Ming was not sure what kind of material it was, But Chen Ming tried it directly and found that the cutting tools could indeed cut the armor of the mechanical family. So Chen Ming immediately removed the two large electromagnetic weapons. Then he opened the machine gun panel nervously and chose to replace it. When he saw an option appear on the replacement panel, Chen Ming's nervousness immediately dissipated. Just as he had expected before, the weapons of the mechanical family could indeed be loaded as ship weapons. And the name of this electromagnetic weapon was also displayed on the replacement panel. Type I Mechanical Electromagnetic Javelin. A simple and unadorned name with the characteristics of a weapon javelin. Its penetration ability is indeed worthy of this name. Chen Ming selected it on the panel, and a new panel popped up immediately. Type I Mechanical Electromagnetic Javelin. Type Small Kinetic Weapon. Manufacturer Mechanical RMW 113 Mothership. Ammunition load 3/50ths. Effective range 20,000 meters. Firing rate 10 rounds/minute. Durability 9%. Replacement yes/no. Chen Ming looked at the content on the panel and blinked uncertainly. After making sure that he was not mistaken, he quickly wrote down all the words after the manufacturer on the terminal. If Chen Ming remembered the news he had read correctly, the mothership should be a type of aircraft carrier belonging to the mechanical clan. However, the mechanical clan's aircraft carrier is still too far away for Chen Ming now. So after recording the manufacturer, Chen Ming turned his attention to the properties of the weapon itself. Type 1 Mechanical Electromagnetic Javelin is the same as the machine gun. Both are small kinetic weapons. Chen Ming was not surprised by this. Although the gun itself is a bit too big compared to the size of a human, it is still relatively small for a ship, so there is no problem with small weapons. It is more outrageous that a weapon used by a single mechanical family can be used as a ship weapon. Although its firing rate displayed on the panel is a bit pitiful compared to the firing rate of the machine gun, its power can be regarded as making up for the lost firing rate. Chen Ming pressed yes on the panel. The charged javelin that had just been unloaded on the floor suddenly melted, and its gray-green shell melted and turned bright white, flowing out of the spacecraft. It looks like the gray-green color is an oxide layer, and the mechanical family itself should be this bright white. As the bright white liquid flows out, some ordinary metal liquid also flows in from the outside of the spacecraft. These metal liquids gradually condensed into the shape of a modified machine gun in front of Chen Ming, lying quietly on the ground. On the panel of the spacecraft, the portside weapon had been replaced with an electromagnetic javelin. Looking at the pitiful 9% durability on the panel, Chen Ming's eyes turned to the mechanical armor that was the same color as the electromagnetic javelin. Then he picked up the tool and cut a few pieces of armor from the mechanical family as materials. After confirming that the name of this material was Baiyun steel, a kind of high-grade metal, Chen Ming pressed the repair button of the weapon. The bright white liquid mixed with other materials needed to repair the electromagnetic javelin flowed out of the spacecraft. Soon, a brand new type I Mechanical Electromagnetic Javelin appeared in his eyes. This weapon full of past fantasies made Chen Ming a little unable to suppress his excitement. It's a pity that there is no target for him to test it now. Chen Ming was like a child who had just got a toy gun, and this idea suddenly popped up in his mind. Wait. It seems so. Chen Ming raised his head and looked at the ceiling of the spacecraft. Looking up through the ceiling is the space station filled with Zerg. While the spaceship was flying into space, Chen Ming picked up the cutting tool, removed the electromagnetic javelin from another combat mech, and replaced it on the starboard weapon of the spaceship. Although the durability of this electromagnetic javelin was also very low, Chen Ming did not repair it for the time being, otherwise he always felt that he might faint at any time. So after putting the two replaced 22mm machine guns on the shelf in the storage compartment, Chen Ming turned around and continued to cut the remaining things on the mech. In addition to the two Type 1 mech electromagnetic javelins, there are still a lot of armor on these three mechs that can be disassembled. These armors are all made of solid Baiyun steel. As long as the disassembled armor is thrown into the spaceship furnace, the remaining computer will help Chen Ming to deal with it. After working for a while, Chen Ming disassembled a total of 627 kilograms of armor from the 3 mechs. After smelting these armors, the output of Baiyun steel ingots will be less than this amount. But it is enough for Chen Ming to maintain the electromagnetic javelin in the future. This Baiyun steel is the second high-level metal material obtained by Chen Ming after the sky steel, and it will definitely provide a lot of convenience for Chen Ming's development in the human world in the future. But Chen Ming thought that the sky steel he had collected with great effort before only produced 5 ingots after smelting, which added up to less than 50 kilograms. Compare it with the fact that he has now eliminated 3 mechanical tribes and got a full 600 kilograms of Baiyun steel. The difference is not a little bit. Thinking of this, Chen Ming always felt that there was something wrong with his mentality. Even if Baiyun steel is the cheapest among all high-level metal materials in his impression, Chen Ming now knows the reason for the low price. But this does not prevent Chen Ming from having the idea of going to other places on the planet to find mechanical tribes. As long as he kills one, it will be another 200 kilograms of Baiyun steel income. Isn't it faster than spending a long time collecting minerals in the high-density asteroid belt? But Chen Ming finally restrained his thoughts. I didn't forget what I had to do was to get enough food and leave here. Chen Ming obtained high-grade metal minerals only to get the first pot of gold when he went to the pirate space station later. Only with the first pot of gold can the subsequent development be convenient. So far, Chen Ming has enough sky steel and white cloud steel on hand. More, it may attract some bad people or things. Moreover, even if I want to trouble the mechanical family, where should I go? Can I find it? If the time spent in the middle is used on other things, can I get more? These questions are unknown. So the idea of looking for the mechanical family is just an idea. The outer armor of the 3 mechanical families was dismantled. Chen Ming picked a combat mechanical family at random, continued to go inside, and dismantled its structural layer. The main material of the mechanical family's structural layer is white cloud steel mixed with ordinary steel materials. Chen Ming will throw these things and the mechanical family's armor into the furnace at that time. And inside the structural layer is the core structure of the mechanical family. According to Chen Ming's observation, the mechanical race has 2 cores. One is a chip connected to a large number of lines located in their heads. The other is a spherical mechanical creation located in the middle of the mechanical race's torso, corresponding to the position of the human heart. There may be data or something like AI personality inside the chip. Chen Ming plans to keep it for the time being to see if there is a chance to figure out its value later. However, Chen Ming has no idea what effect the other spherical mechanical creation has. Maybe it is the control center of the mechanical race? Or a generator? Energy supply? Chen Ming couldn't figure it out and finally decided to dismantle it directly, and then use the terminal to record the whole dismantling process, which might be useful in the future. In short, in the end, the entire mechanical race, except for the chip, was dismantled by Chen Ming into the most basic materials. It was piled in the corner of the storage room. Chen Ming also did the same with the other 2 mechanical races, and soon the bodies of the 3 complete mechanical races disappeared in the storage compartment. Only those materials that were sorted and stacked according to the material type were left. Chen Ming had to say that there were quite a lot of precious metals such as gold and silver in the core structure of the mechanical family. This made up for a large part of the consumption of Chen Ming's previous modification of the overloaded power grid. As the 3 mechanical families were completely dismantled. Next came the highlight, the wreckage of the mind pulse generator. This device had exploded before, and Chen Ming picked up a total of 4 large pieces of wreckage and some other miscellaneous items back to the spacecraft. Chen Ming directly looked at those miscellaneous items with the panel, and they were all garbage. When the time comes, they will be directly discharged from the spacecraft together with the slag. However, there may be some good things in these large pieces of wreckage. Chen Ming picked up the cutting tool and prepared to start with these pieces of wreckage. But at this moment, the quiet little stone suddenly jumped off Chen Ming's shoulder. Curiously, he approached the wreckage and kept sniffing something. Before Chen Ming could react, the little stone stretched out its claws and tore open the burnt shell and got in. Chen Ming did not stop it, but changed the angle and started cutting. He planned to cut off the shell completely to see what the little stone was doing. Chen Ming had just cut a little when the little stone suddenly came out again. It was holding a round stone covered with twisted patterns in its arms. But after the little stone came out, it threw the stone on the floor and climbed onto Chen Ming's shoulder again. It looked like it was sulking. Huh? Chen Ming looked at the little stone on his shoulder and didn't understand what was wrong with it. The little stone couldn't speak, and Chen Ming didn't know how to comfort it with its sulking look. After thinking about it, Chen Ming reached out and tried to pick up the stone on the ground. However, as soon as Chen Ming's hand touched the stone, he immediately retracted his hand as if he had been electrocuted, and his face also became obviously worse. Because at the moment when Chen Ming touched the stone, a very irritating sound without any source suddenly rang in Chen Ming's ears. It was like being affected by a mental pulse. Chen Ming frowned and opened the spacecraft panel, and the name of the stone was displayed on the storage cabin. Spirit Stone, Whisper. This stone is the thing related to mental ability that Chen Ming is looking for. And it is probably the source of the mental pulse. Chen Ming immediately ran to the captain's room and put on protective clothing. He returned to the storage cabin again and tried to pick up the stone. Although the irritating whispering sounded in Chen Ming's ears this time, the sound was not as unbearable as when Chen Ming directly touched the spirit stone just now. However, Chen Ming also noticed that as the time he touched the spirit stone increased, the whispering sound in his ear was gradually getting louder. Chen Ming immediately picked up a box from the shelf next to him and threw the whispering stone into it. The contact was broken, and the whispering in his ear gradually dissipated. Chen Ming couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although the whisper disappeared as the contact stopped. But at this time, Chen Ming looked at the twisted patterns on the stone and always felt that there was still an indescribable weird atmosphere around it. Is this psychic power? Chen Ming said to himself with some emotion. It's just a piece of stone, but it can give people extremely heavy pressure when it comes into contact. If this kind of thing is contacted for a long time, I'm afraid the final outcome will be the same as those animals that fell into madness because of the mental pulse before. No wonder Xiaoshi was quite interested in the stone just now, but threw the stone away as soon as he got it. Although this stone can't see any specific use, it is something related to mental ability after all. Even if it is sold directly, it will definitely sell for a good price. Although the difficulty of selling it may be a bit high, and it may also attract some people's prying eyes like selling a large number of high-grade metals. But Chen Ming can also choose to keep it for himself, and maybe he can find some ways of using it in the future that an ordinary person can't even imagine. Chen Ming found a piece of iron sheet, welded the box containing the spirit stone directly, and threw it in the corner of the engine compartment at the back of the spacecraft. Although it seems that the most it can affect is those things that come into contact with it. But just in case, Chen Ming still thinks it is better to stay away from the stone. It just so happens that he will never go to the engine compartment except for regular refueling, so it can be used as a place to store such dangerous items. After putting the spirit stone away, Chen Ming suddenly realized a problem. Since the mind refers to will, thinking, and spirit, and the mental ability will affect these aspects. For example, the stone just now, its mental ability is to produce whispers, which just interfere with people's thinking and spirit. Then my ability to repair and transform the spacecraft through the panel consumes a lot of energy every time I use it. With this association, is it possible that the panel of the spacecraft is my mental ability? Or is it just an external manifestation similar to the mental ability? If the latter is fine, but if it is the former, then I must pay more attention to the use of my ability. Because the military seems to have unknown means to investigate those who have psychic abilities, or even those who have the potential for psychic abilities. If I was discovered, it is very likely that my past would be found out, and the consequences would be disastrous. It is best not to use this spiritual stone, at least until I am far away from this edge starfield. After warning himself in his heart, Chen Ming returned to the storage cabin and continued to check the other wreckage of the mental pulse generator. However, after taking out the spiritual stone, there was nothing valuable in the remaining equipment wreckage. Basically, it was some metal materials, which would be thrown into the furnace together with the mechanical armor. But overall, it was almost the same. 2 ship weapons, a large amount of high-grade metal materials, and some precious metals, 3 chips that may store valuable data, and the whispering spiritual stone. Chen Ming couldn't help but smile when he saw the harvest. Not to mention that his initial goal was just to get rid of the mental pulse generator. Chen Ming finally spent some time to start the furnace in the work cabin and threw all the materials removed from the mechanical race into it. After this was done, the spacecraft almost arrived at the mining space station. The whole picture of the space station can be seen from the porthole of the captain's room. Xiaoshi was standing on Chen Ming's shoulder at this time, and a pair of smart little eyes looked at this extremely unfamiliar thing to it with curiosity. It was exactly the same as when Chen Ming took it to space for the first time a few days ago and it saw the starry sky. Chen Ming raised the corners of his mouth slightly and touched Xiaoshi's head. Then he controlled the spacecraft and flew towards the space station dock. Just like the last time Chen Ming came to the space station, as long as the spacecraft approached, a large group of scary-looking insects drilled out from some corner of the space station and gathered in the dock. Chen Ming had seen it so many times that he didn't feel anything, but Xiaoshi was scared by these sudden insects. Without noticing, it rolled down Chen Ming's shoulder and fell to the ground. When Xiaoshi climbed up again, he found that these bugs could not threaten him at all, and then he became angry again. Maybe it was the animal instinct that made Xiaoshi subconsciously avoid this ferocious creature, or it might be that Xiaoshi was frightened by these densely packed bugs. Regardless of the reason, Chen Ming's smile became more obvious. Xiaoshi could bring him a lot of fun in many cases. However, Chen Ming did not forget the main business. He quickly adjusted his state and focused his attention that was a little scattered due to fatigue. He connected his consciousness to the weapon system of the spacecraft and aimed at the bugs crowded at the edge of the dock. At this time, Chen Ming suddenly found that the bugs in front of him seemed to be fatter than the last time he came. No, it seems that they're not fatter. Chen Ming immediately found out the video footage taken by the spacecraft when he came to the space station last time. After comparing them, he soon found out where the problem was. Just as Chen Ming judged just now, these bugs are not fat, but their shells have become thicker. Although there is no big change in the overall appearance, the difference can still be seen if you look closely. And just as Chen Ming was looking through the video footage, there were some bugs of the kind he had never seen approaching from the distance of the space station. Chen Ming has only seen 2 different kinds of bugs so far. The other is the larvae that have just hatched from the eggs. They look like alien cubs and can only cause damage through bites with their mouth parts. The actual combat effectiveness is very low. When Chen Ming was looking for food in the cold storage, he was chased by a group of larvae. The other type is the adult worm after the larva grows up. This is what Chen Ming saw after he woke up from the space station freezer. It was the worm that killed the doctor. Later, Chen Ming saw it again in the cold storage of the spacecraft. Through the panel of the cabin, he learned that its name was Thorn Zerg Broadstrider. The appearance is very similar to the Zerg that often appears in various science fiction movies, with 6 sharp hind legs and a pair of huge and sharp front claws like sickles. There are many spikes and a very solid shell on the body, as well as a terrifying-looking mouthparts. And now Chen Ming saw this new Zerg. Although the overall appearance is similar to the Broadstrider, there is a bulging translucent vesicle on each side of its head, and it seems to store some liquid inside. The neck of this worm is also different from that of ordinary Broadstriders. Not only is there no protection from the shell, but it even exposes some disgusting internal tissues. Chen Ming can also see its tight and developed muscles between these tissues. The feeling these worms give Chen Ming. It was as if they had suddenly evolved during the time he was away. Not only did they evolve a thicker shell that could block bullets, but they also evolved the ability to attack from a distance. Seeing the changes in the bugs occupying the space station, Chen Ming's face inadvertently darkened. How long has it been? These bugs have evolved corresponding defense and coping methods based on their previous encounters. If they are given some more time and some external pressure, what will these bugs eventually become? It's really scary, Chen Ming said, and the gloom on his face suddenly disappeared. Anyway, I'm leaving soon. If everything goes well in the future, I will probably not encounter these bugs with extraordinary evolutionary abilities. No matter how fast they evolve, as long as they haven't evolved the ability to fly in space for a long time, they can't threaten me. While only a few cysts are standing on the edge of the dock, they open their mouthparts to the spacecraft. Chen Ming directly controlled the spacecraft to avoid the scattered liquids and took the opportunity to increase the distance between it and the space station. Besides, I didn't come here to see the changes in the bugs and how powerful they are, but to test the weapons. I could easily clear a large area of bugs with the unmodified machine guns before. If I come here again with the same bugs, it will be difficult to judge the effect of the new weapons compared with the old ones. These evolved bugs are simply the best targets for weapon experiments. Just thinking about this, Chen Ming felt that the abandonment of the space station exuded a conspiracy from beginning to end. A space station belonging to a company that was based in a dangerous marginal star field was abandoned overnight by a group of bugs that could kill a large area with civilian ship weapons. However, Chen Ming's purpose was never to find out what happened to the space station, so this idea was thrown out after just a circle in his mind. Chen Ming continued to control the spacecraft, keeping the spacecraft and the dock of the space station on the same plane. At the same time, he continued to keep the spacecraft away from the space station until it reached the range limit written on the electromagnetic javelin panel. At this position, through the high-precision camera of the spacecraft, Chen Ming could see every move of the bugs on the space station. The electromagnetic javelin panel says that it has a range of 20,000 meters. Let me confirm it myself. After aiming at the swarm of insects that were about to disperse in space because the spaceship was invisible to the naked eye, Chen Ming couldn't wait to fire. The electromagnetic javelin on the port side shook slightly, and a bullet accelerated by electromagnetics flew straight to the space station without any resistance in space. At the same time, the dull hammering sound of the electromagnetic javelin firing came to Chen Ming's ears along the hull, making Chen Ming's heart almost skip a beat. I didn't feel it when I was shot by the mechanical family before, but when I controlled the electromagnetic javelin to shoot, I always felt that the hammering sound had an indescribable sense of power. And the actual effect of this shooting did not disappoint Chen Ming at all, and it could even be said to be far beyond expectations. As soon as the sound of firing reached Chen Ming's ears, Chen Ming saw that the electromagnetic bullet had hit the locked position. Just one shot. From the edge of the dock to the depths of the dock, at least dozens of broadstriders were pierced by this shot. As long as they touched a fatal part, these insects did not even move, and directly lost their breath of life and fell into the cold space. Their evolved shells were like paper in front of the electromagnetic javelin, and they could not provide any protection. The insects that were gradually dispersing were like being pricked by needles, and they became agitated in an instant, constantly waving in the direction of any possible enemies around them. Obviously, there was no point in them doing this. 6 seconds later, the second electromagnetic bullet was fired, and once again penetrated the insects that were almost crowded in the dock. This time, there happened to be a few cystic insects among the dead insects, and the cyst of one cystic insect was just pierced by the electromagnetic bullet. A large amount of liquid overflowed from the cyst and flowed to the ground. The metal floor was instantly covered with small holes. Although the vacuum does not transmit sound, I still imagined the sound of acid corroding metal. With the death of the second batch of dozens of bugs, the remaining bugs finally realized that the enemy was far away. They hid in the buildings of the surrounding space station. Although the electromagnetic javelin can directly shoot through the wall of the space station, the limited field of vision makes it difficult for Chen Ming to aim. Since I've just seen the effect of the new weapon, there is no need to continue. Chen Ming refilled the electromagnetic javelin with bullets, drove the spaceship back to the edge of the space station dock, and attracted the bugs hiding in the building again. Before the attack range of those cyst bugs could reach him, Chen Ming drove the spaceship and disappeared in front of the swarm again. The spaceship did not fly directly to Reimu. Instead, just like the last time, after leaving the bug's field of vision, he made a big circle and came to the living area of the space station. Chen Ming originally wanted to go to the power generation area to replenish some fuel, so he specially chose the dock to attract bugs for weapons experiments and attract bugs over. But now that he arrived at the living area, Chen Ming found that it seemed to be because he attracted many Zergs last time. The interior of the living area was already full of various disgusting growths, just like the mining area, and there were many unhatched insect eggs mixed in it. There was no way to set foot, let alone get fuel. Fortunately, the fuel that Chen Ming prepared before leaving the space station for the first time was enough for him to consume for a very long time in the future. It was just that he wanted to see if he could get more with the idea of not taking it. But now that he knew that the living area and the power generation area below were very dangerous, he just left. Chen Ming turned the bow without hesitation and pointed it in the direction of Ruemu. After a while, Chen Ming stood on the solid ground of the temporary camp again. He picked up the tools and nutrient solution and started the daily task of taking care of the crops. After finishing, the sky in the temporary camp was just approaching dusk. But Chen Ming only felt that his head was a mess at this time. The fatigue accumulated from the whole day of repairing the spacecraft came up all at once after relaxing. After a simple tidying up, Chen Ming lay on the bed in the living cabin and rested peacefully for the first time. Because up to now, all the obstacles in front of his goal have been cleared, and all the difficulties have been solved. Starting tomorrow, without the mental pulse and the crazy animals, everything will return to normal. Everything will proceed step by step. 7 days passed in a flash. Today is the 20th day since the spacecraft landed. The autumn of Ramu is about to pass. Before the temperature dropped completely, Chen Ming harvested the second batch of oranges planted outside the spacecraft. Completely fill the last small space squeezed out of the cold storage room. All the food in the entire cold storage room is enough to support more than 10 months. In addition, there are still oranges planted in the hydroponic tank of the planting cabin. Even if the planting cabin of the spacecraft explodes on the spot now, Chen Ming can still reach the pirate space station safely. The food reserves are enough, so it's time to leave here. Chen Ming closed the door of the storage cabin. In the field outside the spacecraft where the crops had just been harvested, Xiaoshi was found looking for something to eat. Chen Ming did not take Xiaoshi away directly, but squatted in front of it and said, "Xiaoshi, I'm going to leave. Do you want to come with me?" Xiaoshi tilted his head, not knowing whether he understood what Chen Ming said. But it must have seen the tender sprouts that Chen Ming had just plucked from the hydroponic tank and immediately climbed onto Chen Ming's shoulders. Chen Ming touched Xiaoshi's head and turned his head to look at the camp he had built with his own hands. Except for the surrounding fences, the entire temporary camp seemed a bit empty. There was nothing worth remembering here. Looking at Xiaoshi on his shoulder chewing the tender sprouts with satisfaction, Chen Ming smiled and walked onto the spaceship. A few minutes later, the engine of the spaceship started, and the iron ore turned the bow and flew into space. The spaceship did not fly directly in the direction of the scheduled pirate space station, but stayed at a certain distance from the space station as before. Before officially setting off, Chen Ming planned to go to the asteroid belt again to fill the remaining space in the storage cabin with ore. After all, places like the rings of Ramu, which have such a high density of asteroids rich in metal minerals, may not be encountered for a long time on the road. Chen Ming started the asteroid detection scanner and found a high-density area in the asteroid belt. High-intensity mining lasted until 4 days later. The remaining shelves in the storage compartment were all filled with various metal materials. In order to ensure that the proportion of different materials stored was balanced, so as to avoid the lack of specific materials in the future, Chen Ming also deliberately threw a lot of ordinary iron outside to free up a lot of space. The metal in the entire storage compartment should be enough to sustain the voyage for half a year as long as Chen Ming does not need to repair the spacecraft frequently. Everything was ready. Chen Ming set up the navigation route on the navigation system, and the rest was left to the spacecraft itself. Watching the spacecraft gradually accelerate, Chen Ming sat down on the chair in the captain's room and relaxed. Space navigation is just like sailing on the sea. There are not so many places to operate. At most, when encountering unexpected events, Chen Ming needs to deal with them personally. The rest is waiting a long wait. Waiting for half a year, waiting for the spacecraft to pass this half-light year. Chen Ming has long been accustomed to the boring life day after day, a life without intersections, just for survival. It is better to say that now that Xiaoshi is with me, I am living a better life than before. The books in the terminal are enough for me to read for half a year. If I get tired of reading, I can try to practice everything I have learned from the books. The last minds I mined before leaving were for doing these things on this half-light-year journey. As long as it is not the kind of modification that will cost lives if it is wrong, Chen Ming can do it himself without relying on the panel. Chen Ming opened the panel. The panels of all cabins, all equipment, and all objects are listed. Looking at the panels in front of him that almost cover his entire field of vision, Chen Ming knows that he still has a lot of things to do. However, so many modifications have to be done step by step. At present, the most prioritized modification object should be the living cabin in Chen Ming's imagination. Because many modifications require some accessories, if the panel is used for modification, then Chen Ming only needs to prepare the materials. But if it is done manually, Chen Ming has to find a way to make these accessories himself. Therefore, Chen Ming planned to transform a studio in the living cabin. A studio can facilitate many things. Moreover, the living cabin of the iron ore should be used by the 4 to 6 people of the iron ore. Chen Ming does not need to occupy too much space in the living cabin to rest alone. It is no problem to transform the extra space into a studio. Transforming the studio and the subsequent modification of the spacecraft will also be a long process. Chen Ming has patience and time. 3 days later, the prototype of the studio appeared in the living cabin. Chen Ming made a small machine tool through the precision tools in the repair kit, through continuous trial, verification, dismantling, and reconstruction. In this way, many molds and other equipment he needs can be made by machine tools. Moreover, after the machine tool was made, it appeared on Chen Ming's panel like the equipment in other cabins of the spacecraft. Chen Ming can even control the machine tool to work by himself without doing it himself. However, Chen Ming will not do this for the time being, because in the process of making this machine tool, Chen Ming can feel that the memories of professional technology in his mind are gradually becoming his own abilities. If you make things through the panel, your ability will never grow. Chen Ming needs to practice to make the memory truly become a part of himself. Moreover, when Chen Ming read books after work these days, he can clearly feel that he is learning and mastering knowledge much faster than before. After all, many things can only be done by actually doing them. So on the last day of the first week after departure, Chen Ming transformed half of the living cabin into the appearance of the studio he envisioned. Machine tools, item racks, tool racks, work tables, and tools from the repair kit that can meet almost all repair and modification tasks are already in the studio. The next step is to modify the spacecraft itself. The overall modification of the spacecraft is not as simple as the modification of a living cabin. Every step needs to be carefully considered to avoid damage to the spacecraft and accidents. Therefore, by the second weekend after departure, Chen Ming had just planned the overall modification plan of the spacecraft and made some accessories that might be needed later. It was not until the 15th day after departure that Chen Ming was completely ready for the first modification. The first object Chen Ming wanted to modify was the temperature control system of the spacecraft.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.